Going live.
Hey y'all, I am James Wright and welcome to the shop. Tonight we are going to be talking about the mortise and tenon. Finally we're getting around to what is most often considered the basic joint. And this is a fun one because it is it's basically the first really solid joint that gets used all over the place. It is probably the most common standard joint. And so this is going to be a fun one. Plus, we're also going to be doing far more integration, so there'll be a lot more of how do you actually get all of these pieces to come together to actually make them fit with one another and balance out. So this is a fun one for me. If you can't tell, I'm a little excited. But we have been having a good bit of fun. Oh, wait, we talked about the bench last time because we haven't done anything since that.
Yes, there's even been a video out.
Yes, we had the next video in Sarah's bench.
And apparently James has had fun
out.
making short videos on Instagram about it.
Yeah, I was playing with some new things.
I know you were playing. Because I was surprised when I saw him. I was like, okie dokie. I should be careful what I say from now on. It might end up there.
Especially on lives. Hello, everyone.
Well, lives, I know I have to be good at, and they're not here.
And for those of you who, well, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been joining me over on the new Hive Mind. If you are on Patreon or a member on Facebook or in the Hive Mind on Facebook, you will have gotten a link to the new Hive Mind. We're keeping the Hive Mind on Facebook, so if you're on Facebook and don't want to switch to something else. But for those of you who aren't on Facebook, we're soon going to be having that on another site. And I've been having a lot of fun over the last few days getting that up and going.
Oh, no, now they're also going to be on Discord. Now I feel like I need to be on both.
Yes, it's the fun
I'm not set up
being
yet,
on social media. You got to be on all of them. So I'll probably be announcing that in a week or two once we get everything set up. I'm having fun making the Discord server for it. So if you want to find out more about that, get in contact with me. We'll set you up just kind of for the in crowd at the moment. The in crowd, yes. But let's get back to, is there any announcements I need to make before we jump in?
I mean, there's something I should MWTCA is coming up.
Yeah, MWTCA is the national. It's coming up in June. It's actually right about a month. Just over a month from now. So really getting excited about that.
You are muted and
going to a tool meet. It's going to be fun. So yeah, if you haven't seen that, if you have to be a member of MWTCA, and they will have sent you a notice. If you become a member, then you can contact them to get the information to get there. Or you can show up at the door, spend a little more money. You can actually become a member at the door. It's just more money. As things always go, more money. That. Yeah, cool, we're good. So let's jump into this. We are working on the joinery window, and for those of you who don't know, this is 6 boards that come together to make 9 different joints. And this is a great way to test your skill and try out different things. This was something that would have commonly been for an apprentice to test and show their skill. Because it's not about making any one individual joint. You can make any one individual joint that comes together. But making all of these joints come together and all of them come together perfectly is a very hard thing. This is the one I made, 2 or 3 years ago when we did this. And on this one, you can see it didn't quite come together. There's a good gap in this last corner. Now this is a great joint, came together perfectly, but this corner isn't exactly square because of all of the other joints that had to come together to make it work. So we've been making the half lap. We have made the mitered bridle joint. We've made the regular bridle joint. We made the dovetail. Today we're going to be making the standard mortise and tenon, which is this one. This is one that was really gappy last time. But this one is kind of hard to show off because you can't see the joint. It is a really well hidden joint. We're not going to make it through. It's only going to come in about 3/4 inch, about halfway into the board. And so we're doing the standard mortise and tenon, making it a little bit different. So a lot of people go back and forth about, do I make the tenon first or do I make the mortise? There's the word. Do I make the mortise first? I prefer to make the tenon because I find it easier to mark the mortise from the tenon, though there are some people who like to make the mortise and then make the tenon fit the mortise. I just find that to be a few more steps involved. So we're going to make the tenon first to then make the mortise. But the difficult part of that is not making the mortise and tenon, because we're going to put the tenon on this board and it's going to mortise into this board. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is getting that spot exactly where it needs to be, making sure all of this fits together so that all of the other joints, because any movement of this in any different direction is going to mess up all the other joints. So I need to make sure this is copacetic with everything else. And so that's why I'm leaving this in there from last time, which it was the butterfly key, so we can make sure we get that in there cleanly. But as with everything, we're going to make sure we mark it all down. We want to make all of these fit. So this is the 5th joint. So I'm going to put a 5 down here at the bottom because it's the bottom end of this stick. And I'll put the 5 in the middle of this one because it's in the middle of this joint. And that way I know that the 5 here corresponds with the 5 in the middle of this board. If that makes any sense.
And it conveniently adds up to 3 and 2. Sorry.
There's a reason I'm very good.
You know where Arthur gets it from.
Yes, yes I do. And if anyone has any questions, throw them in the chat. My wife is there moderating it also. Hi, Sarah. And she will throw a shoe at me and say, "Shut up, I've got a question."
Yeah, it's a slipper tonight, but anyway. Wait, where's my duck? Did you hide my duck?
I don't know.
No, here's my duck.
Where did Kamikaze Duck go?
Kamikaze duck.
Yes. So let's actually do some of the layout on this. Now what I want to do is I want to make sure that this is actually in frame and in focus. Let's bring it up a little closer. There we go. So I want to make sure that this board will slot into there. And then I want to make sure that it's actually joining in this orientation the correct way. Now what I want it to do is I don't care if it's out of joint one way or the other, as long as wherever this board is matches this board. I want it to be the exact same as this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this down here. Actually, I'm going to flip it over. Put this on top here. And I'm going to flush up the end of this board. Actually, I'm going to make sure this is all clamped together good and tight. I'm going to flush up the end of this board so that those are nice and clean. And then I'll put a couple nick marks in here where I want this to intersect. So one there and one there. So I know that is exactly where I want that board to touch. I'm transferring from reality. I'm not going to take a measurement from here to here and then put the measurement over here because that's one more thing to come in. Anytime you bring a tape measure into it, you're introducing one more place for errors to occur. So now that I've got this out, I can get rid of that piece and that piece. And I know, just make sure my lines are on there hard enough so I can actually see them. Put them in there just a little bit harder. There we go. You can see those, right? Tiny little tip marks. The smaller you can make them, the easier they are to disappear. Now, I know where this needs to go in this way. Now what I need to do is address this tenon. And what I want to do is I want to create a shoulder on here. But I want that shoulder to be precisely where it is. Because if that shoulder is in too far, then when this board comes in, there's going to be a gap in there. If the shoulder is too far out that way, then I'm never going to be able to get the last board on all the way. So just like that, we have to then go back and align these out, make sure I'm on the right ones. So I've got that and that. I've got that and that. Here, let me make sure these line up. Dead on. Hey, look at that. So on these ones, I've got from this end to a mark here, and these two line up exactly the same place. I want to put that line onto this board as well. So I'm going to take one of these, and I'm going to take this one because it's got a convenient little nick mark on it. I'm going to flush it up at this end. And it should be directly flushed up at both ends, as it is. And I'll put my knife in here. I'm just going to nick it right there. One little line. That's all I need on there. And I'm going to draw that line across. Put the knife into the line, slide the square up against it, and go light, medium, hard. Now I've got that shoulder I want. I'll roll this up on. I'm going to back up a little bit here. This side with the tape is my reference face, so I don't want to have the square on here like this. I want to reference the side that has the tape, which I'm actually going to go ahead and take this off. I don't need this anymore. I'll make this easier. So reference the tape side, put the knife into the nick, slide the square up against it, light, medium, hard, roll it over one more time, slide up against, light, medium, hard. Roll it over one more time, flip this over so I'm referencing the side with the tape. Put that in. And so there's my shoulder. Now, I don't want this to be a through tenon. Make sure I got the right board. I need this one. I do not want this to be a through tenon. I don't want it to go all the way through the board. I want it to go through a little ways. So I need to cut off a certain amount of this board. How much of that should I cut off? It really doesn't matter. Usually, because this is going to be a 1/4 inch thick tenon, about 3/4 inches is all I need. This is just going to be something that's held in with glue. Did we get a bunch of super chats?
Yeah, but you don't ever breathe.
Oh, well, thank you. I saw some colors pop up there.
I almost threw the duck at you. But there's a camera in my way, and my aim is only so good.
Well, what do we got?
So, I hope I'm saying this right. Sumi Ayoda said, in appreciation of all you do in the new hive mind. And then Evan Van Dyke says, time for a joke.
It's always time for a joke, especially in the new hive mind with the dad bot. Anytime you type, I'm feeling happy today, dad bot chimes in and says, I'm feeling happy today. Hi, I'm
happy.
I'm
dead.
How are you? I'm dead.
I got it.
Like a good dad bod. Well, what's the joke?
Does it come with a dad bod? Let's see.
Yes, it does.
Where did Captain Hook buy his hook?
Half off store?
The second-hand store.
Oh, second-hand store. Ah, yes, good. What's the other one?
Oh, I can't remember if I... All right, ready? I've decided I'll never get down to my original weight, and I'm okay with that. After all, 5 pounds and 13 ounces is just not realistic.
Very true. Thank you. You've got to correct me on the pronunciation of your name. Sumi, I believe.
I'm assuming.
But,
I'm sorry. That was a really cheap shot.
What?
I said I'm assuming.
Oh.
I'm sure he's never heard that one before.
No, we've been having a lot of fun on the new hive mind. So thank you for joining over there. This has been it's one of those.
We got lots of new folks.
Discord's been good.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, so let's cut this down to length. So we're going to jump in here, and I'm going to cut this at some length. Does it really matter? No. I'm going to cut it about halfway in. So let's make it about 1 inch long. I'm just going to put my knife there, slide the square up against it, and cut this.
Oh.
Now, what's that?
He said, think of a lawyer. Sue me.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
I like it.
Flip it over. Same thing on this side. And, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and go all the way around because I'm going to cut it off nice and clean. I want the bottom of it to be nice. It doesn't have to be perfect because we can always trim it later.
I have a question when you are
Yeah, what
ready
we got?
for one. Roy Reynolds asked, would it not be better to put the base of the square on the most wood instead of off the end of the board?
Usually, yes. Putting the square this way rather than this way. But because of the amount I'm referencing, it's really not going to make any difference one way or the other. Technically, you usually want to keep the square on the side you're keeping so that your line is always on the side you're getting rid of. But it doesn't make that big a difference. If your square is square, it's square. But I guess if I really want to be specific, yes, I should probably have it on the other side. Good question, though. Thank you. So let's cut this off. And for that, I'm going to use my carcass saw for those times when I've got to get rid of the dead body.
It's very hard to carry yourself out. That's a reference to the bench build. Was that on the main channel? My joke.
Oh, yeah, it was in the main channel. Yes.
Yeah.
So let's start on here and cut it off. Ta-da! Let's see, how close was I on that line? It's a little off. I'm off by 32 of an inch away from the line. So I tend to veer away from the line a little bit. My brain just kind of says, stay away from the line, stay away from the line. It doesn't really matter that much. So next thing we want to do is we're going to cut the cheeks. So imagine a tenon is a head. So the tenon is the head. The shoulders are here. The cheeks are here. So that's what we're thinking about, cheeks, shoulders. And for that, I need my marking gauge, my mortising gauge, because we're going to be creating a mortise in a little bit. But I want to know how wide to make it. And I'm going to make it with a 1/4 inch. Actually, do I have... I don't get to use this one very often. So today we're actually, well, I'll use both. Today I'm going to be setting it up. It's sharp enough. I'm going to have a mortising chisel, 1/4 inch. And what I want to do is I want to set up my pins to the exact size of that. Now what I could do is I can line up the pins on here, set it up on the chisel, and lock it down. The problem with that is you tend to have 3 things that you're trying to lock down, get them all in place, and then lining it up and keeping the chisel the right side away from it. It's a pain to do that. And so I prefer to come over here to reality.
You only visit every so often. Sorry.
I set the chisel on the board, and I'm going to put a mark on one side of the chisel. Oop, don't let's slide the chisel. Bring it around. Put the mark on the other side of the chisel. And this will allow me to then easily put the pins into those marks and then slide the fins up about it. The pins are both housed in there. I can reach underneath and tighten it down. And just like that, my pins are now exactly the same width apart as the chisel. Look at that, pretty. And they're the right distance away from the side. Also keeping in mind that the fence is riding up against my reference face. My reference face is the side with the tape. So now we can come in here and mark out our tenon. Any other questions while I'm marking this?
No, but JJ, I see you on here.
Is the sun on live?
Behave. He put a question in, but it's not necessarily related to the project right this second.
Otherwise you get booted off, boy.
It's a woodworking question, so points for that.
Okay, good.
But behave.
Here, switch over to this one. Normally what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the board in the vise. This gives me all my hands to do it, rather than just trying to do it quickly. Because usually I'm laying out a whole pile of them all at once, rather than just one. So in this case, we've marked it out and we need to cut down that 1 inch. And normally, I like to cut the shoulders before I cut the cheeks. Because the cheeks are harder, I'd rather stop at that point. It makes it easier for them to fall off. So, is there a reason to explain it the other way? No, we're going to do it that way. We're going to do it my normal way. So we're going to put it back in here, grab our crosscut saw, and we're going to do the same thing on here. Any questions yet?
Yes. However, they're not necessarily related to the project right this second.
Well, read it while I set this up. Then.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yep.
Suf Sanon asked, I remember when you made a low angle joiner plane. Can you make a wood plane without a plane?
Yeah, you can make a plane without a plane. All a plane is a jig to hold a chisel. It just takes a little more skill to work the chisel without the jig holding it. But yes, you can make a plane without a plane. I've actually done that on a few of them. When I made my my low angle, I made that without a plane. And in the end, for flattening it, I showed how to do it with and without the plane. Without the plane is usually just sandpaper on a flat surface, just like you'd flatten a regular metal plane. But yeah, you can make it without a plane. So let's cut the shoulder on this. And I'm just going to cut down close to that line. Taking my time, working across, making sure that cut is right on the line. Down to depth here. Need a little more on the backside. Down to depth there. Now flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Rinse and repeat, just like I have to do all the time with my hair. All the time. That whole shampoo cycle is a pain and a half, isn't it, babe? Some people like to stay away from the line and come back and chisel it. And that's actually a really good way to learn. Downside to it is you have to spend more time, what's the word for it? More time doing it. It's another step. But it guarantees or it gives you a far better chance of dead-on accuracy. Once you learn the skill of cutting on the line, it becomes so much easier because you can just cut and be done with it. So now we're going to grab our tenon saw. Tenon saws cut tenons. They're usually a much deeper rip saw. And this will allow me to cut down in line with the grain. Oh, I love a good sharp saw. Sharpened it last week, very happy. It catches too. Developing that line all the way across right where I want it to be. And I'm going to cut corner to corner because I don't see the line on the back. I don't want to follow that down. Do the same thing on this side. Good sharp teeth cutting into end grain. They like to bite. Again, we cut corner to corner because I can always see my side. I can't always see the other side. Flip it over. Do the same thing over here. There we go. So we're at corner. Now we can flatten it out. Cut down. Oop, where am I at? Nope, on the other side, that's where. There we go. Just like that. A little off the line, so correct it and cut down. Just like that. Now we've got a tenon. Now, this is just a two-sided tenon. And I want to actually make this one full four-sided. But before we do that, let's actually go back and clean up this surface. Because this is one of those things that's a little bit harder. Any questions while I grab a chisel? Such a long walk to the chisel rack, too. Yep, I do need to address that.
Did you just ask for a question?
I wasn't sure if there was any.
Yeah, let's see. Andrew Seymour asked, hey, I have an old shaky table with a piece of OSB as a workbench. Could I upgrade it or should I just build a new one? I have the skills to build one.
Build a new one. A table design is not a great bench design. A good sturdy bench makes an incredible amount of difference, and it's well worth the work. So yeah, build a new one. Okay, so in this case, what I can do is I can put the chisel over here, and I can put it over to the other side. And what it should happen is touch this corner and this corner at the same time and touch everything all the way across. But in this case, I've got a little hump in the middle, and I can see that. Just a little hump right here. So I'm just going to come into this and clean that off. Just plane it down. Let's see what that gives me. Just a little more right here. And that will allow me to see exactly where there are any problems on it there. Actually, I need to come in the line a little more here. Let's see where we're at.
So is it a problem if you were to accidentally take off too much?
Not really. However, if this is just going to be a glue joint, this is the important face because this is what's going to be gluing to the inside of the mortise. And so that's the most important face is this. So getting this joint really nice and clean really matters. But it doesn't have to be perfect. Glue can fill up a bit of a gap.
Oh, I was just thinking.
The end grain here, though, really doesn't matter. Even if that doesn't touch the bottom of the mortise, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
What's that?
It made me think of, not that most viewers are going to relate to this, but like plucking eyebrows or something that you always end up taking off a little too much. So I didn't know if too much was going to cause a problem or if it just gets hidden.
A little more here. Yeah, it just gets hidden mostly, as long as you don't take off too much. But undercutting a little bit is not a huge issue. I could also come in with a router and do that. That's not my favorite method to do it. Got a little bit of a bump here. I'm trying to see where it is. I can feel it, but I can't see it. Right there.
So Alex wants to know, do you flatten the sides of the chisel since you used it to decide flatness, or is it good enough straight?
It's good enough. If it looks straight, it's straight. You really don't have to be dead on flat. If you're worried about it being flat, then use your square and do the same thing with that. The chisel's just in hand, so it makes it easier than that. If a chisel isn't that straight, and I'm talking like, a 64th out of alignment, if it's a couple hundredths out of alignment, who cares? It's not going to make that big a difference. So now we've got our tenon, just making sure we're good. We are good. Now we want to cut down vertically. And so for this, on my marking gauge, my mortising gauge, I've got this single pin on the other side, which I really like. And then you've got the double pin on there. So I'll use that single pin to then mark out. Here, let's put it back on this. Use that single pin to mark out where I want this cut to be. And putting the second shoulder, the fourth shoulder, whatever that is. Here, move it out so I can actually get to it. Putting the tenon shoulder on all four sides is not necessary. If it's done right, it hides the joint much better, and so it looks a little cleaner. And so that's why most people do it. But it is more work. And since I didn't do it the last time I did this window joint, I decided to do it this time. Last time I just did the two sides. So now we've got that. Now we're going to rotate it up on edge, and we're basically going to do the exact same thing all over again, but on short edge. And this time we're actually going to chisel it away, because that's another fun thing to show off. So I'm going to do the same thing in here. Any questions on doing this?
So I was trying to follow up on something. So if you just answered this question, let me know.
What's that? Let me just get What's that?
Peter, I'm going to butcher this name, Schmeides Comp, and others have asked why chisel versus a shoulder plane versus a router plane for cleaning the cheek.
Chisel's on hand, and when you're just taking off a shaving or two, it's just fast. It's easy. It takes a little more skill, but it's fast and easy. A shoulder plane would probably be the best thing to use, because a shoulder plane will also provide flatness. It checks for it. A router plane is very nice because it gives you coplanar to the surface, though coplanar to the surface isn't always what you want. And so it's really just personal preference. I like a chisel because it's quick, it's easy, it's here, I don't have to mess with it. And as long as you've got the skill for it, it works out really well. Unfortunately, the only way to get the skill is to try it. There we go. So, in this case, we're going to do the fun part here. Let me turn this around so you can see it over here. In this case, we're going to chisel out rather than cutting down the cheeks. So I can grab a mallet. Grab the mallet. I can come in here. I'm going to go halfway down on my line. So my line is right there. I'm going to come halfway down to it. It takes out that. And then I'm going to come halfway again to the line. The grain is nice and straight, so I'm getting a really good reading on it. And I'm going to come halfway down again. That's really close. I'm actually almost into it. And then we're going to pare out. And I can see the line on both sides, so I'm just going to let the chisel ride on both sides on the line itself. Right into it there. And then I'll use this to come in and clean it out. Except for you're dull.
That's no way to talk to me.
Flip it over and do the same thing on this side.
I feel like a very one-sided conversation over here. While you're doing that, your son wants to know, what is your least favorite wood?
Spruce. Really don't like spruce. spruce is a type of pine, and it is annoying. It's just really soft, doesn't grain well, doesn't work easily. Okay, going halfway to the line, halfway to the line. See if I can get one more halfway to the line. And then one more right into the line. I don't know, what would be my worst? Probably a spruce, probably. Only used it once and it was annoying.
I feel like I should have been paying attention.
There. So, now we've got a perfect shoulder all the way around. We've got our tenon that's ready to go in. Now I could come in. Actually, I am going to come in. I need a little bit of work on this shoulder. I'm just going to address it here. I'm going to grab a shorter one, smaller one. Grab my 1/2 inch. And I'm actually going to undercut this a little bit because undercutting shoulders really helps you out and gives you a much cleaner, as long as I angle it correctly, cleaner look. So I'm not going to touch the rim. I'm just undercutting just a little bit, getting rid of any junk that might catch inside. Clean that out. There we go. So there's our tenon. Tenon done. Now it's time for mortise. Now, when cutting the mortise, this one, right? Yes, this one. That one. Perfect. I just want to make sure I'm putting this in the right direction. I got to reassemble this because I want to make sure I'm putting it in. Oh yeah, I got tape on both sides. Reference face, reference face. Good way to remember it. I need it to go in that way. I think any questions while I'm setting that up?
No, we're caught up for now.
Cool. So the question is, when cutting the mortise, do I cut it in the vise or do I cut it on the bench? There's a couple of ways to do it. Number one, I can set it on the bench. Get the camera out of your view. And I can grab a holdfast. And I can lock it down in. And this makes it pretty easy to then mortise. And the nice thing is, it's down into the bench. So all of my force is going down into the bench. It's a very solid connection. However, it's a little bit more flimsy to set up. There's some bounce to it. The other option is I can put it in the vise, and I can pound down in like that. But then you're pounding on your vise. And so you got to ask yourself, is your vise poundable? And personally, I like pounding into the vise. So that's what I'm going to do. So what we need to do here is we need to actually mark out exactly where this tenon needs to go in. We know where the board needs to go on the board, in reference to the other one, but we don't know where the tenon is because it's smaller. So I've got to find where are these nicks. Oops, they're on this side. So it goes in like this. So that means we're going to do it like that. So what I can do is I'm going to put this into the vise. Let me set this up so you guys can see. And I'm going to slide this down just a little ways to something like that. And I can see exactly where those nicks are that I put in earlier. So I'm going to put my knife into that nick and set this on top. I'm going to let the side of the board slide over until it touches the knife. Let me focus this in just a little bit more for you.
Oh my gosh, please do.
There we go.
Oh, thank you.
Slide this over. And now what I do is I know exactly where the sides of my tenon are. There's one side, and there's the other side. And I've used reality to line up exactly where it is. So when that goes in, I know this shoulder is where it should be, and this shoulder is where it should be, and that's exactly where it should be there. Next thing I need to do is mark in the two sides of the mortises. So I'm going to pull this up a little ways. My tape is on this side here, so I know that is my reference side. I want my fence to be against the reference side. Just like on this one, I had my fence up against the tape side. I'm going to put this on here, and I'm going to mark from there to there. I haven't done an actual mortise and tenon in a while without going through.
I was just thinking in my head, like, how I assumed you were going to explain how you knew when you had gone. Is that when you had used your depth gauge?
Yeah, I was showing a couple of ways of that. Because most of the time I like a through.
That you even remembered that.
I am impressed. This is good. She's going to be taking over the channel soon.
No, I don't have the power to. I
usually prefer through tenons. I like to be able to see the joinery. There's something about hiding the joinery in a regular tenon, putting the shoulder on all sides. It looks really sharp because the two boards just touch. But I like seeing the joinery. I like being able to know how it went together. So usually I'm doing through tenons. So doing a stopped tenon doesn't go through. Don't do that quite as much. So one of the questions is, should I grab a brace and bore out most of the material? And if I'm doing something that is 1/2 inch or larger, I'm usually going to do that. If I'm doing something that is deep and long, I'm usually going to do that. Like recently, we did some with Sarah's that are 1/2 inch. They're 1/2 inch by 3 inch mortises. So they're 1 inch by 3 inch mortises. They're pretty solid mortises. And for that, it's really easy to just grab a 1 inch bit and hog out the material and come in and trim it out. For something small like a 1/4 inch, lining up a 1/4 inch bit is a bit of a pain because this is 1.5 inches wide. So that would mean I would have to drill 6 holes at depth, 1/4 inch. The amount of time it's going to take me to drill 6 holes that are all perfectly aligned in the way it should be, I just grab a chisel and chop it out. So drilling a hole on a small one, it's just not going to save much time. Now here's the next question. Bench chisel versus mortising chisel. Really doesn't matter. If you have a mortising chisel, then it's a little more fun. It's more beefy. It chops out a little bit quicker. You can get a little more force into it. But a bench chisel, really not a problem. The big benefit to a mortising chisel is there's less issue if you're levering out the chips. This is designed for it. It's strong enough it's not going to bend. If you're levering out the chips with a bench chisel, you need to be very, very careful that you don't bend it while you lever it out.
So that's what I should be using as the mortar.
Yeah, except for I don't have a 1 inch wide mortising chisel. That would be a massive pig sticker.
James hovers when I use his other chisel.
So I'm actually going to
all right. 1 inch mortising chisel coming on.
Yeah, now that the project's all done.
Oh, I'm sure we'll find another one.
Actually, I don't think I've ever seen a 1 inch mortising chisel.
Oh,
I've seen
now
3/4
we
inch.
have a mission, folks.
Here. Hopefully that is dark enough that you guys can see this. Just barely. There we go. So we've got this here. Now, the idea would be to drive it in straight here. And so I want to be, like this would be putting it right into the line. I want to move about 1/8 inch away from that. Put it right in the line. And I'm just going to eyeball it vertical. I got to grab the mallet. Just going to eyeball the chisel vertical. I don't need anything special on this. And I'm going to go tap. And the second tap, it was a little bit more of a solid. I only needed the 1 tap on this one. I'm going to move it over 1/8 inch or so, following the direction of the bevel. It's the same if it's a bench chisel or mortise chisel. Just like that. And I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to go another 1/8 inch or so, direction of the bevel. And each time it's going to take a few more chips, and I'm going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. And there I'm back 4, and I'm probably, oop, I pulled it. Let's go 5 and see how deep we are. So I'll put my finger on there. And I'm down in a 1/2 inch already. Oops, sorry. And I need to go down 1 inch. So I'm about halfway there, and I'm not even halfway across this. And each time it's just going to go down deeper and deeper until we get our way most of the way across. Oop, sorry for those of you watching live. I'm trying to get the microphone away from this when I hit it. I guess it's probably not going to make much of a difference no matter where I put it.
So the question is, do I have as much trust holding the chisel as you did holding the dowels for me? He's not even paying attention.
And one of the ways to tell the difference between someone who does this all the time and is really, really proficient at it and someone who doesn't is what they do with the mallet. So normally the idea
So should I
is,
just come demonstrate?
well, no, I'm actually doing it the way you would do it. Is I'll have one hand that's here by the tip and one hand up here on the handle, and I'll set it in place, and I'll pick up the mallet and I'll hit it. And then I'll set the mallet down and I'll realign it and do it again. Now what I should do is hold it down here, put my elbow on the table, wiggle it out, don't set the mallet down, move it back. It's much, much, much faster. So let's see how deep we are now that we're all to the other side. Okay. And I need to go a little deeper, not quite to depth. Wasn't really wailing on it. I probably could have gotten it to depth if I was cranking away on it. But we've gotten most of it. So now I'm going to turn it around. So the chisel was this way. I'm going to turn it around here, staying about 1/8 inch away from the end. I'm going to go back this way. Give myself a bit of a square edge there. Let's lever out these. Actually, let me grab my, I have an 1/8 inch mortising chisel. This is great for cleaning out junk. So in this case, we're going to start back here, turn the bevel around. And I'm going to clean out going the other direction. We're just going to go back and forth until we are down to the depths we want. Love cleaning out all those. Let me get back here. I'm going to turn it around. Go straight down here. Down a little more. And I'd love to do the, Paul Sellers did it, and a few others have done it with a glass side so you can actually see it. One of these times I'd like to show that. It's really fun to see. If you haven't seen that, you've got to go see Paul Sellers' video on mortising, where you can actually see the window side. Kind of makes things click. And he does it almost exclusively with a bench chisel. He doesn't like using mortising chisels. So now what I want to do is I'm going to grab my depth gauge. Actually, let's grab the one I made. I made this one in a video not too long ago. And I'm going to set it up to the same depth as my tenon. This way I have a peg that sticks down that depth. And I can put that in there, and I can see how much more I need to go. Bring this down a little more. Ooh. There. So you can see I'm about a little less than 1/4 inch at the bottom there. So we're going to keep on going. And it's one of these fun things where you just go back and forth until you're down to the right depth. And then you clean it all off at that depth. Lever out those chips. Use the smaller one so I can get down in there a little easier. And it should be about 1/4 inch or so off the bottom here. And this is the point at which you're about 1/8 inch or so. This is the point at which you're like, I'm so close. Let's just cut the tenon off. It really doesn't matter. But let's go back and do it again. Follow the bevel, move it back a little ways each time. And it gets a little harder to pull it out each time because got a little more material down in there. It's around here you start thinking, I wonder if I'm going to go all the way through the board. Oh, no, I got ways to do that. Clean. Ooh. And that's why we have a rubber floor.
I thought you were going to say wooden shoes.
That too. Wooden shoes, rubber floor. There's a magnet. There is a method to my madness, contrary to what my wife would say. Okay, let's see where our depth's at now. Okay, there we go. In the middle, we're at our depth. So now I can kind of eyeball that to be where I want to go. And it's just working back and forth. That same method of going in the direction of the bevel. I'm still staying about 1/8 inch away from either end, and that way I can still lever against that and clean out the chips. With a big mortising chisel, levering out is completely doable. Check my depth there. Okay, we're good there. We're good there. So I've got this half done. Now let's clean off this half.
So I Like Waffles wants to know why you're not using reality to keep track.
Because the the size of the mortise is still too small for me to go in. I'm staying away from the either side an 1/8 inch, so I can't get the tenon into the mortise. At least I'm assuming that's what you're asking about. Okay, that should get me. All the way down. Okay, there we go. So I'm actually a little bit deeper than it needs to be all the way down, but I can slide all the way across from one side to the other. I'm about 1/8 inch away from the other side. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the straight side towards my line. I'm going to go about halfway back to the line, so taking off about a 1/16. I keep my chisel vertical. Oop, it's starting to twist. Don't let it twist. If it wants to twist, stop, back up, clean it up so it doesn't twist in the next try. Otherwise, you're just going to start making your mortise wider than it needs to be. Go back in, do it again. Okay, and now, yeah, I'm not going to do half that. I'm going to go right into the line, really, really close to it. There we go. So that side is all the way down. I still have this side over here, so I can still lever against that side. Use the smaller one though. And now we're going to do the same thing on this side, halfway to the line. Any questions?
No, but apparently there were some concern about noting other streamers in the chat, and I was about to say we welcome that here because, you know, you talk about Paul Sellers or Rex Krieger and all those others.
Yeah, yeah.
By all means,
woodworking is not in a vacuum. We all learn from each other. We all work together. You know, saying that I follow such and such is kind of pointless.
I mean, is James's head the shiniest? That might be up for debate, but.
What's that? Oh, yes. I don't know. Rex and I are.
I know, that's what I said. You know, like, those might be fighting words.
Oops, sorry, I thought it was on the other camera. So. Now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to look at it. This is where I'm going to grab my bench chisel. Make sure I get all the junk out of the bottom. That's looking pretty good. Although I think this side is actually leaning in, and so I think I need to trim that back a little bit. But let's check and make sure. Yeah. See, that's going to be nice. That's going to be nice. Let's give it a try. Let's see what we get. Yep, that side was leaning in just a little bit. So what I can see is it's wedged down in there really good and tight and way out of focus. But there is a bit of a gap on this side because that whole thing has canted off. So if I put a square on here, I'll probably see that this side is obtuse. Yep, there's obtuse there. So I need this to tip back this way. So let's pull it apart and clean that out. So one of the problems with a regular mortise is you can't pound it back through. So it takes a little bit more oomphta and goomphta to pull it out. And I was getting a little overzealous on that one. Ta-da! So now let's clean that up. Any questions?
So Alex was saying, hang on, that maybe you can emphasize how not to lever, like don't lever against the edge.
Yeah, let me show you that as soon as I get this cleaned out. Actually, I'll do that right here once I get this. Let me clean this out. So I'm just going to tip the chisel back. I put it right into the top here. I want to take this back. Oop. You can see how I'm tipping way over. It's a little more than I want to go. So I'm going to loosen it. So I create a little bit of a shelf there. Put it back on that shelf. Just going to clean this side too while I'm at it. So when levering, if I always leave a little bit of material on either side. I don't go all the way to the line on either end. That gives me some material I can lever against. Because if I've gone all the way to the line and now I try to lever against it, I'm just going to push that line back. It's not as much of a problem where I've got the shoulder on all four sides, but if I have this shoulder coming all the way out the outside, that line then shows up. So if you're doing it with a bench chisel though, if you're doing it with a bench chisel, any levering, you run the risk of bending the chisel. So you generally want to scratch with it. Scratch. You want to scratch the bottom with it, loosen up the chips, and then most of the time you're going to want something else to lever or dig out the chips. And so that's why I often have a smaller chisel. It's not scratching the sides. It makes it much easier to clean out with that. I'm not working against the sides of the joint. And so using your chisel you're cutting with to loosen them up, chop them up, and then bringing a smaller in to scrape and clean them out. That will take care of a lot of it. Okay, now let's see what we get. Oop, this side. Don't put the dovetail into it.
All right. Alex was saying focus was a bit off. Were you just on the smaller camera?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice. That's well happy. So on this one now, you can see that is nice and tight. So there we go.
So compare it to your first one.
Well, the first one, it was tight, but because the other joint, because this one is off, this one ended up creating a bit of a gap. So this would have been nice and tight, except for in the assembly of putting this all together, small problems in all of the joints came together. So once the last joint didn't quite make it together because of all of the other problems that came out. And so that just puts a little bit of gap in other places. Each individual one of these joints will fit together perfectly. But once you start putting them all together, if there's any slight problem, it starts compounding. So that's one of the things that makes this fun, is because it's not about making one good joint. It's about making 9 joints that work together. And you have to do an incredible, amazing work in order to get all of them to come together nicely. Otherwise, that last one just looks a little bit... So there, that is our 5th joint. Next one is the drawbore tenon. So we're actually going to be doing a through tenon with a drawbore peg. And for this one, I'm actually going to create the tenon ahead of time so that we're just focusing on the mortise side, because the tenon, it's exactly what we've done 10 times already on this. So that one is, the drawbore is one of my favorites, because the drawbore is a joint that is designed to go together, be incredibly strong, and not need any glue. It's a fun one. We actually did that for Sarah's legs.
I was just going to say, I
There's
actually
no glue in them.
have done that.
And once it's together, it's together. It takes a lot of work to get that apart. It's destructive work to get it apart. And so it's a fun joint. It's one of my favorites. So yeah. So there is our mortise and tenon. It's one of the things I don't like about the mortise and tenon is there's nothing to show off because it's there. Oh, let me check for square while I'm here. Let me grab my good square. This one is not that it's better than the other. It's just longer, so I can check more accurately. Yeah, that's happy. That is, on both of these, well within the discrepancy of the wood. That's what I like right there. Happiness.
So I have a question.
What's that?
Let's see. Meow asked, what % of original stock should my tenon be? Should it be 2/3 of the original thickness or 1/3?
Usually I like the tenon to be 1/3. That's about average. Yeah. Depending upon how you're doing it. Like on Sarah's, on hers, rather than doing all 4 sides, normally you take off the 2 long sides and you would leave the 2 short sides there. But on Sarah's bench, we actually took off the 2 sides and kept the tenon full width. So the tenon was, the thickness of the full board was 1 inch. Our tenon thickness was still 1 inch. It just wasn't quite as wide as the original board was. And so you can do it that way. But usually my rule of thumb is 1/3. So if it's 3/4 inch, I make it a 1/4 inch tenon. That's about what I like. Some people like to do a 3/8 tenon with a 3/4 inch board. And if you're just going to glue it and it's not very deep, that works great. It's much easier to do that because it's easier to cut a 3/8 mortise than it is to cut a 1/4 inch mortise, because wider mortise is just easier to dig things out. In the end, it's just a personal preference. There are lots of different rules of thumb, and everyone you talk to will give you something slightly different. So hope that helps. What's next?
I think, oh, there was a video request. I don't know if you've made one of these before. It was how to make a wood plane without a plane. Have you done that before?
I've never done one specifically of how to make a wood plane without a plane, but I've done at least 2 videos where I haven't made a plane making it. I haven't done a plane, or I've shown other ways of doing it, like with this one. Yeah, making a plane without a plane isn't necessary because you can always use some sandpaper on a flat surface, or you can freehand it with a chisel, and there are 100 different ways of doing it. It's much easier to do that, and planes are so cheap in most places. You can get a brand new, really nice Chinese style wooden plane. I know, saying Chinese plane makes it sound like it's a cheap plane. No, it's actually a really good plane. You can get them on Amazon brand new, and they're a Chinese style, so they're a wooden body plane for like $20, and they're brand new and work functional. And Rex Kruger on his channel, he is actually doing that right now and showing that. There are lots of different options for cheap planes, and so making a plane without a plane is just kind of why? But I mean, for the challenge of it, yeah, you can always freehand chisel. I mean, I have several videos of making things completely without chisel. I made a box from firewood without a chisel. I have one video
where I took with a chisel.
What's that?
With a chisel.
With a chisel. I have one video where I took a 1/2 inch chisel and a leather strop, and with those I went into the woods and I cut down a tree. I literally cut down a tree with a 1/2 inch chisel and a strop. I brought the log back, and in my woods, I split the log in half. I turned 1/2 of it into a bench bottom, and then I grabbed staves and made trees, and all I used was a chisel. Walking into the woods with a chisel and a strop, and I made a stool. It's a lot of fun. And the stool's still out in the woods. The kids play on it. It's in the treehouse.
I just love how you describe the woods, because I don't want people thinking like Robert Frost. It's
yes.
only like 6 feet of wood. We don't have a forest in our backyard. So you can use a small area.
That's one of the fun things about working with a chisel, is that it is the tool. Every single tool in the shop is a jig for holding a chisel. A plane is just a really wide chisel in a jig. A saw is just a whole pile of chisels in a row. You look at a table saw, well, that's just a bunch of chisels in a circular pattern, and the whole rest of the table is a jig to hold all those chisels and run them all through the wood. A CNC is a computerized way to hold a couple chisels on a circular spindle that run around in a circle. I guess once you get to a laser, then you get to the point where it's no longer a chisel, because you're burning the wood, but then you could take it back to like a burnt out canoe. That's like the predecessor to the laser cutter, I guess. So once you can master a single chisel, you can make anything. It's a fun thing to try. So, any last minute questions?
Debak asked, doesn't the shoulder of the tenon depend on the wood? Too thin and it will split off.
Doesn't the shoulder of the tenon depend on the wood?
I guess for the thickness.
Yes and no. If you have a softer wood like pine, you want to be careful of not having really thin mortise walls. But 3/4 of the thickness is pretty good in most everything. I guess if I were, in pine, if you're working with a 3/4 inch board, you're going to have a really problem no matter what you do. Because if you take it, I would still have a 1/4 inch tenon in a pine board and a 3/4 inch wide pine board. The reason being is if I made a 3/8 tenon, made the tenon a little stronger, then I would end up making very weak sides in the mortise. Each mortise would only be 3/16 thick. And that, I guess if it's just a regular standard tenon where it's only going halfway in, it's not going through, 3/8 might be a little bit better in that method. But I mean, again, every wood is different, every rule of thumb is different, and so it's one of those things where you ask 10 woodworkers and you're going to get 11 different answers, because there is no best. Best is a direction, not a location. You can always head towards best, but you'll never get there. So, cool. Well, I think that'll do it. Mm-hmm. But we are going to have fun next week. Next week is actually our Q&A, and we have a couple other fun things planned. So we have 4 more joints on this, and then I've got a couple interviews that I'm lining up with a couple other woodworkers. So we might do those once a month or so, where we bring on another woodworker and put them in. So some other fun people. So stay tuned. I think I'll do it. So until next time, if you have any questions, let me know. But until then,
and thanks for everyone who joined us. Appreciated it.
It was a fun time.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.